So I've been really burdened about this subject I want to talk about today. I'm going to do a couple of shows on this. And it has to do with this weird moment we're in the country where Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and anti-Semitism. It's ever since Charlie's death, chaos has gotten into the MAGA movement. And it's like the sharks smell blood in the water. And I'm telling you, the church better wake up. You guys are the hidden power that can right this ship. And we have to I'm going to call out prophetically some things that need to be talked about. And in the meantime, while I'm getting into that, today's big subject of the attack on Israel, Jews, anti-Semitism, and the crazy talk that's in our own social media world, I'm going to make enemies today, so you'll enjoy this broadcast, just watching this one. And share it, by the way. Make it viral. If I'm going to make enemies, might as well make them in the right places. I'm thinking about the economics of the instability. America is in this shaking time. But man, gold is still going up. It's almost getting beyond a lot of you to the point where, I mean, if you had gotten in on it at 2000, you'd be like dancing right now because it's up to like 4,000, going to go to 5, maybe 6. Who knows? Instability drives the price of gold up. But silver is the one that so many of us can get in on. I've got the Christmas silver giveaway. When you can get free silver for Christmas. Claim over 1 silver round for a certain amount that you purchase, but just check it out. Go to lancewallnau.com/gold. The Birch Gold group is there. And if you do that, then I got a special offer that's there for silver. And there's something which you could do right now. It's gone up over 200%, like in the last 2 years. And the silver's mine and the gold is mine. Go to Lance's Christmas silver giveaway, lancewallnau.com/gold, and find out all the facts. And then we'll see you on the other side of this. Well, like I said in the opening, this is a really serious subject. I don't normally, I do broadcasts all the time. And sometimes when you're in this business, preach the word. There's so much you could preach out of the Bible that you never run out of content. My challenge is always, I'm also looked to on Flashpoint and other broadcasts to do commentary on current events, and there's a reason for that. I predicted Trump rising in 2015 when nobody else saw it. I predicted that he would be called Cyrus, and that became even bigger during the peace deal that he did with Israel and the war they had. And Cyrus was festooned everywhere on billboards and signs, and I don't make a big deal out of that. If you're some prophetic ministries would be blowing that up like he said it. But I just, people know it or they don't know it, doesn't matter. I predicted the Trump delirium or Trump TDS, Trump delirium syndrome, and I predicted that in 2015. And I said that would be the terminology that the media will use. And how do you know that stuff ahead of time? Well, you know it. I'm a teacher first, prophetic second. So for those of you that are charismatic, that's different offices and different types of gifts. And I spent years traveling with Kim Clement, and I think that really, really tuned me in. He was a fantastic South African prophet, and those that know him don't need an explanation. But I found it frustrating when I was traveling in the prophetic community in the charismatic Pentecostal world, because once people know that you can prophesy, they don't want to hear you teach, they want you to give them a word. And I found that frustrating to my gift. My primary gift is teacher. So I get drawn into news because so much of what's happening requires a Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other, and the news is always so fake that you have to have a Bible teacher to actually ferret it out. And guys like Jack Hibbs and others do a great job of doing that. And then we had Charlie Kirk, who was our front runner for being able to take the arguments of the Spirit, which is the wisdom of God, and apply it to the folly of man, and then bring it home to Jesus. And he was just getting that down to a science when he was martyred. Now we have confusion, and it's evidenced by the fact that without Charlie Kirk as a centerpiece for the cultural, Christian, conservative, political voice, there was no hub in the middle of the wheel. And so, boom, Bannon goes flying off with Levin, and Nick Fuentes sadly, fills in the void for the under 30-year-old male in the United States. And he's totally, God bless him, he's got to pray for him, he's godless. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. but young men are frustrated and aggravated. They've been steeped in socialism. They've been trained in the universities and the school systems, which I don't think that we as Christians appreciate, because we pull our kids into Christian schools and homeschooling. But it doesn't change the culture, the fact that you have the majority of American youth going through that system. And that system has been so contaminated by progressives that from their LGBTQ flags in the classroom to the transing of children at younger and younger ages, and even keeping the parents from knowing the gender pronouns that the child's using in the class. I mean, it was so sick, it's gotten so bad that we're just relieved that Donald Trump came along and thump, dropped the gavel down and said, no more of this, no more of that, no more girls and boys sports. And folks, the executive orders are temporary, and the left is a machine with trillions of dollars of vested interest in the business of government, which is a business machine. Understand it. It's a money factory. And Trump has interrupted and redirected it momentarily. But the indicators are that the midterms, that for the most part, Christians don't engage. And it's tragic, because what you're about to lose if you don't wake up. I'm saying this kind of, it's offensive to say it. But what you're going to lose as Christians is if we don't get more of the church awakened in this third great awakening to some fundamental things like engage in your civics. If you don't participate, if you don't vote, if you don't use your agency, then this system that is hostile to you is going to come back with a vengeance. There's a verse in the Bible that is kind of ominous in this sense. Jesus said that if a house is swept clean, a Trump administration comes in, puts Christians at the top of all these cabinets, but the machinery under it is 80% Democrat, leftist, and Washingtonian business. Then the moment that you don't occupy that house, it gets retaken, and it's 7 times worse. Imagine what it would be like when you have the weaponized government coming after all the ministries and nonprofits that were standing with Donald Trump, and they try to impeach him, and that ghastly machinery goes back hostile against the church. You hear about talks about civil war and all that stuff. I don't think Christians will ever be civil war participants. But you need to know they're at war with you. And that's going to get to be very ugly. And America could have some very tough days. And you're saying, well, Lance, it's kind of dystopian at Christmas. Well, my job is to warn you. If you're in Jamaica and the hurricane's coming, I was in Jamaica 2 weeks before the hurricane. And we didn't see the hurricane. It was a little blip on the horizon. Kept looking at it like, well, I guess I can go to Jamaica now. The air traffic's okay. And I preached, and you don't realize I'm watching that hurricane heading in, and you realize, man, just 2 weeks ago I was there saying Jamaica has a couple of years in which to establish the Christian influence within that nation, and then it can influence the whole Caribbean and much of Africa because of the sound that Jamaica has. And then you realize, man, the hurricane's coming. So I see the hurricane coming. That's a prophet's job. That's why I started talking about the prophetic today. The prophet's job is to tell you what's coming. And I see the trajectory of that hurricane. And the hurricane's coming in midterms, and nobody cares. I mean, half the church doesn't vote, and the half that are registered to vote don't show up except it's presidential elections. And it's actually the number one irritant that you ought to have, is that you've got the ability to lock the front door and you're letting the enemy come in. You've got a guy going around your neighborhood checking every open door, and you're leaving your door open for 7 times worse to come in. It'll start with midterms, then it'll be a big battle with J.D. Vance and his running mate, whether that's Don Jr. or Rubio or whoever, we'll find out. But then it's not going to be pretty. And it doesn't have to be that way. That's the reason why I'm doing this broadcast. We're entering a period of time that has increased hostility against people of faith. It's a time when Christians are going to be tested on a moral, physical, psychological, and even a financial basis. I'm here to remind you that God is the one who has blessed you thus far, and He will take care of you in the future. You have a divine responsibility, however, to see trouble and prepare yourself. For example, with record inflation eating away at the value of the U.S. dollar, the savings in your retirement account is in danger of slipping away. I recommend diversifying your 401k or IRA out of paper assets and into physical gold. And the best way to do that is with a gold IRA from Birch Gold Group.
And that includes no penalties, there's no taxes when you transfer current retirement funds into Birch Gold. To see how it works, I want you to go to lancewallnau.com/Birch and get your free info kit, and you'll be glad that you did.
Now, I want to talk about the spiritual fault lines in the United States, because when Charlie went, I'm telling you, then Tucker Carlson comes on the scene and does his. What was weird about Tucker is I prayed for years, and I still do. I used to do this Periscope thing late at night, and it's where I built a lot of you guys as an audience. And I pray, and we walk around, and I pray at night. And I remember at night I called, this is when Russell Brand was not a Christian yet, and Tucker Carlson wasn't conservative totally. I mean, he was in his newscasts, but he wasn't identified with Trump and with this cause at all. And I remember praying for Red Rover, we call Russell Brand over, and Red Rover, and I called Joe Rogan over. Now Joe Rogan, is doing his broadcast saying, hey, some of the sweetest people he knows, the nicest people are in that church. Well, the fact that we prayed him into church is amazing, right? So, but I really count it as a spiritual thing, that God's moving. And then Tucker came along, but then Tucker carried with him something like Candace Owens has, which is they have the influence of a megaphone that impacts the conservative movement. And since most pastors aren't talking intelligently about current events, all of us go to drink at the fountain of Tucker or a Candace or a Joe Rogan or a Bill Maher's constantly being quoted or Steve Bannon, because we don't have those really strong Christian prophetic crossovers. And they're there, but they guys like me, we don't occupy the larger sphere of an audience because, we're maybe a little bit too Christian for the average, F-bomb dropping audience tolerant person. But I had an alarm go off, like my antenna went off, and it was during the Student Action Summit with Charlie. And I heard him talking about the Epstein files and all the young people. I particularly heard young girls screaming, screeching, and you could hear the youth in the audience. It wasn't like a robust, baseball audience. It was like a lot of youth and a lot of girls there. And I could hear him screeching because he got them all wound up about having to come out with the Epstein files and pressure on the president and on the administration, and Pam Bondi started getting targeted. And something in me was saying, this is strange, because with the Epstein files, it links into what I felt was a pent-up kind of Jewish animosity towards those perverse Jews. And of course, George Soros hasn't helped, the branding of Jewish people for the conservatives. And we got our David Rubins and other people that identify as Jewish and conservative, and he's a different category, obviously. But the reality is, I heard the broadcasts, and in my spirit, I could hear him. I could hear Tucker's influence on Charlie, and I could hear, because Charlie was then, I found out, was going through some pressure because he was getting into some high money because he was becoming a political force, not only here, but in other countries. I mean, he went over to South Korea right before they lost the election. He was a young man who I believe would have been president. I mean, Rush Limbaugh said it when he met him. Donald Trump said it. This guy was on a presidential trajectory, and even his wife Erica said, she accepted the fact that if he felt like he was called to run someday, he would run. And this guy was a future president, and he had the gravitas to do something which was very unique. He was a coalition builder. He could stay true to his biblical theology, but recognize that in the realm of politics, you're cobbling together a much larger coalition of resources and people agreeing on policies and platforms that align with your values. But you can't make everyone take the litmus test of an evangelical to be part of your political movement, or you'll never win. I mean, like I said, we didn't even show up and vote, so we're hardly the tribe that's going to put you in office. But Charlie knew how to work that distinction. And when he was removed, Mark Levin, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Fuentes, Candace Owens, you name it. Jack Posobiec now running around, the secondary voice for Steve Bannon. Suddenly you have this fragmentation. And what's at the center of it? It's what I heard in my spirit at the Student Action Summit. It was an Israel frustration because the war was still going on. And the fear was that America was getting dragged into a war. Now, we weren't going to get dragged into a war because God had his hand on Donald Trump, put him in office to, boom, crush the nuclear capacity of Iran and do it without boots in the ground, do it through pure air supremacy and technology. But Tucker was, and Charlie, and a great many of our tribe were under this anxiety about Israel's disproportionate influence in American affairs. For some reason, something very strange happened. Netanyahu, who's not a bad guy at all. I mean, he is the Trump for Israel. He's got Hamas cannibalizing and the equivalent of 70,000 Americans on 9/11. That's what it's like when you get 2,000 Jews in a population of 7 million. It's like 70,000 Americans getting killed in 9/11. Well, they're October 7th. They raped the girls. They cut the heads off of kids that played soccer with them. The people that were in Gaza that worked in the areas of the kibbutzes and the communities around Gaza, they literally mapped out all the houses and families. I mean, it was cruel. They literally created a blueprint to go back so they knew exactly where to go. And they had their day of hell that they rained down on Israel. So here you would be sympathetic with any country going through that, right? But then you got Hamas there, then Hezbollah, boom, decides to hit from Lebanon. And these are all proxies of the Iranian machine, which for some reason Obama gave billions of dollars of access, resources to, and legitimized. And so they attack. Then you got the Houthis, you got the Yemen, attacking. And so Israel on all sides is under threat. And they have to figure out with their limited resources how to fight off all three. Now here's the point. Something happened which made Israel into the bad guy. And you got to stop and think about this. Christian, I'm talking to Christians now. I realize this might go viral, it might be incendiary, but so be it. Every now and then I got to do what I got to do. And the fire that got lit against Israel struck me as strange. Suddenly you see the progressive campuses in the United States, all from the river to the sea, basically meaning annihilate the Jews and drive them into the ocean. From the river to the sea. You see the campuses lit up because these kids on the campuses have been taken over by the 80%, 90% progressive socialist training and educators that they got in there, the weird professors. And, so then you've got this weird Gaza thing in Europe, especially in England and such. You see this because they have so many Muslims in the population, they identify, it's a spiritual thing. They identify with any Arab in their battle with a Jew. So Trump now has, this is complex, but you'll follow it. Trump has the Abraham Accords. Thank God Trump is in office that time. He's pulling on Jared Kushner and the business and economic ties he's got with the Saudis, the business deals he's doing. He has the power of a gorilla to be able to hold the Arab nations and don't buy into this thing. So let's just let the terrorists be isolated and let's deal with them. So Israel has to fight their battle. The United States is getting pulled in, and there was a whole lot of MAGA people, now, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, a bunch of other names I could give you, which is all our people when we're all for Trump and for America and for conservatives. But now when it comes to Israel, you've got a really interesting situation. Something shifted, and everybody went anti-Netanyahu. And that's because the ethos, the spirit that is in the American media and in the American left, and to a great extent in our own conservative circles, is we buy into this oppressor-oppressed, socialist, progressive, Marxist worldview, which is there's an oppressor, who, by the way, is you, and when the left can pull it off, it's going to be business people, rich people. It'll be whites against blacks. It'll be the people with money against people that don't. And this is dangerous because in the American system works when there is a robust middle class and you have the link is going to be your unity as a people, believe it or not, with a Judeo-Christian worldview, with a faith that believes that God is the one that gives the laws, not government, and that individuals can choose their own way, and it's the business of government to create a ladder that allows everyone to get an equal opportunity, Marxism says, forget that. We're going to just put the underprivileged or the people that are the afflicted class or the oppressed class, trans, queer theory, whatever, and they're going to get preferential treatment to equal out the board here. Something strange happened in America. Conservatism came along and said, stop that. Trump comes into office. Israel now is being fought at and persecuted. But that thinking of oppressor oppressed suddenly made Israel the oppressor against the Palestinian. See how that goes? Now they become the oppressor. Let me tie all that back together. So I'm listening to the Student Action Summit, and I'm hearing this concern about Israel and its influence on the White House and the influence on Trump. And Charlie made a trip over to talk to the president, and the president basically put him in place, calmed him down, and said, I know what I'm doing. Let me do it. Charlie comes back and says, we got to trust the president. You know, we have to pray for him and trust that he'll have the wisdom to work it out. See, Charlie was the balance, and everything kind of held itself in homeostasis. When Charlie was assassinated, suddenly you see the fault line, the earthquake happens, and Israel once again becomes the issue. Now, I'm telling you something, and you guys know this is true if you're a Christian. Israel, that little 7 million people on that little plot of land, this is smaller than New Jersey, how can it be the deciding factor of nations unless the cosmic conflict of hell and heaven ultimately will come down to what takes place over Israel in the Middle East? Now, for you Christians, we're entering into a field called eschatology. And what I'm saying is, Charlie made an interesting point. He said he's worried about the under 30 crowd because they're anti-Israel. Well, the Student Action Summit didn't help because it implied in some ways that Israel has to be held back because America can't be dragged off into wars for Netanyahu. Yeah, I agree. America can't be manipulated and controlled by the political agenda of any party in another country. But there's a big difference between that and turning Israel into the enemy. You catch that? Turning Netanyahu and his government into a pariah, into an evil. And this is where my friend Steve Bannon's got off. He's made Israel evil. And he'll say, no, I haven't done that. Yeah, well, you've made Netanyahu, right, the evil seducer. When in fact, Netanyahu is simply the Donald Trump of Israel trying to keep his people from being overtaken by militant terrorism that was attacking him on all sides. Now, Trump drops the bombs on the nuclear facilities. That's settled. And for a moment, we have a period of peace. But what takes place next is that the trade is now all these nations, all these leaders, he has a big panel there. And I don't think any Christian realized it. But now Egypt and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and all these other countries all have their flags in Gaza, which means you're going to see more pressure for this two-state solution. Where's that going to go? Well, Tucker Carlson has his son on J.D. Vance's staff. My guess is that J.D. Vance is more in theoretical alignment with the Tucker world, and that Israel, who is Israel and what is Israel? Now, I'm not speaking for J.D., I'm just telling you guys ahead of time. Our midterms, if it keeps going the way it is, it's going to kneecap Trump's whole administration. He will have had 2 years of activity. Boom. Then the machinery is going to start impeaching and investigating him. And then you're going to see a very much convoluted and conflicted J.D. Vance candidacy for presidency. My concern, and I'll drop it here, is you and I better be clear on the Bible and Israel, because somehow the Jew has become the target and Israel has become the enemy. And if America decides, and I'll make the case for you from a biblical perspective, if America decides that it becomes adversarial to Israel, I would say, I don't remember this, but Dutch Sheets, he had a vision years ago about these coins of mercy dropping from heaven. And he got that, curiously enough, before Biden, in my opinion, took the election. I'll say stole. But, Democrat, whatever happened, and God providentially he allowed it because Trump accomplished so much more in his first, in his limited 2-year period as president now than he could have had he been hobbled into office back then. So As much as America suffered more debt and, 20 million more, unaccounted for invaders that entered the country, bad as that was, Trump coming back in, dealing with the globe the way he did, settling wars the way he did, resetting the global economy the way he did. It's better that it happened that way. But Dutch had this vision of coins of mercy, and he saw mercy. And I'll tell you something, America has had more gospel preached. Look at the memorial service for Charlie. We had virtually every cabinet officer that was Christian, up there sharing the gospel. I mean, Rubio did better, and he did a 2-minute presentation of the gospel that rivals Jensen Franklin or Franklin Graham. It was amazing. The gospel has gone out in America. Let me ask you a question. To him who much is given shall much more be required. America has the gospel. America's heard the gospel. And America continues to veer towards a trajectory of anarchy and self-indulgence and only held back by the restraining force of the administrative power of Donald Trump, who is temporary. If we don't have a change in America, and I know Bible sales are up and campus revivals happening, and for the first time church attendance is up, I'm not denying that. I'm saying if we don't have an awakening of civic engagement by the awakened church in America, then what's going to happen is we're going to see evil, perhaps 7 times worse, come back in. Now, I have a selfish interest in this. If it was just me and Annabelle, and listen, most of my baby boomer audience, I think I could survive the gradual decline of America into the future. And I'm not being dystopian. I'm being prophetic. There's a difference. I see the hurricane coming to Jamaica. But I've got grandchildren, and I've got children. And it's funny how that works. Nehemiah said, fight for your families, fight for your children. And that meant that when the enemy was surrounding them, the call to arms wasn't for them. It was a greater cause. It was for those that they love. So for the sake of your children, for the sake of your grandchildren, because we're at the point of decision, and God can continue this remarkable reformation, revolution, and recovery of the institutions. But there's pent-up spiritual warfare at a higher level than the church is used to. And I fear, as I travel amongst all the enlightened prophetic circles and apostolic and intercessory, I don't think we're hovering over this site. We're not dropping the bomb spiritually where we need to. We don't have the awakened church engaged. We don't see the hurricane coming. And I'm telling you, I haven't even gotten to Israel. Why Israel still matters to the church and to the nations? Because God's covenant with Israel, God doesn't have a covenant with the United States that is rooted in Genesis. We have forefathers and promises and states, but we don't have a biblical mandate that God's going to back the United States. And we've got more gospel preached here than anywhere in the world. And in the face of all that light, we are even more potentially judged, except for mercy. Be careful that we don't cut mercy off. All right, that's my opening preamble to my discussion on Israel.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world